This video demonstrates computerized provider order entry and management in oncology for a patient who is admitted to an inpatient unit with a recurring outpatient appointment. Inpatient is on Cerner and the therapy is occurring on the inpatient encounter. In this scenario, a patient who is regularly treated in the outpatient setting has been admitted through emergency due to a comorbidity such as pain. Since orders within the oncology setting are written in a future status, they cross encounters. This CPOE will go over the management of those orders with the ability to see how they can be activated on the appropriate encounter and managed for that space. To start the scenario, I am logged in as a scheduling clerk for the outpatient unit. I am currently in the scheduling application book, and I am accessing the future request list. The future request list will show all the appointments that are requested for the location identified in the request queue. At the bottom, I can see my patient, billed Island Greek, has 2 future requests. I'm going to schedule their first systemic therapy outpatient appointment. I will right-click on the patient, click to complete request. The next screen shows the appointments that are also on the request list and unbooked for this patient, as well as the request in question that I'm currently booking, and any booked appointments for this patient if they are within the system. Once I hit OK, it brings up the scheduling accept format. There are a few fields I must complete in here, such as, is interpreter required for this appointment? Within the order screen, I can also see the details, such as chair time and nurse time, which will be pulled through to the scheduling slot. Once I hit OK, the work in progress list, also known as the WIP, gets populated with the patient and the corresponding appointment to be scheduled in question. The scheduler will select the date in which they wish to book this appointment for. They can see in the WIP the requested date that they are aiming to schedule within. Each facility will have their own parameters of how many days they are able to move this appointment forward or back. I can drag the book to the required time frame and drop. I can see that the time duration from the order details has carried forward. Once I select OK, and I'm happy with the time and chair selected, I can confirm the appointment. This window brings up one last time to confirm the details and the time I am booking for this patient, at which time I can also call them to confirm. Once I select OK, it is asking which encounter I want to associate this appointment to. Since all systemic therapy appointments will be booked on the reoccurring encounter, I will select OK. If I go to open my book for the appropriate location, I can see that the appointment is in a confirmed status. The patient now presents to the ED department and is complaining of uncontrollable pain. I am logged in as an ED Registration Clerk. In the tracking shell view under the correct shell for Lionsgate, I am now going to quick reg the patient presenting to the emergency department. I'd click on the lightning bolt for the ED quick registration. and I would search to locate my patient to see if they are already registered within the system. I can see here, and I would verify this information, that the patient is already in existence within the system and that they currently have a recurring encounter. However, I want to create a new emergency encounter, so I would select to add encounter. For this quick reg encounter, I would look over to make sure the information is correct and click complete. Once hitting complete, I notice that an armband will print upon pressing OK. For this demonstration, we are not going to print any labels. The patient is now registered within the emergency department. During the patient's visit to the emergency department, the best possible medication history will be completed. I'm currently logged in as a pharmacy technician who will be showing this process. However, who completes this process may differ depending on resources at your facility. Under the pharmacy technician login, I would access the tracking shell and go to the correct location in which I am working. I can find my patient who was quick registered on this list and right-click to open their chart. I will then have to assign relationship to the patient, just like signing the chart in current state. This brings me into the patient's chart, where I can review their allergies to confirm with the patient if they have any new allergies or if the allergies listed are correct. In this instance, the patient confirms that these are the correct allergies, so I will mark all as reviewed. I will then access the orders profile and click to document medication by history. In this screen, it lists the medications that the patient has previously stated they take at home. I can review the list and change anything if required, as well as documenting any other extra medication that the patient may note that they are using. For this example, the patient has told me that they are also taking Advil at home. I can click the most accurate sentence that corresponds with the medication which the patient has noted. For this example, the patient has said they are taking 200 milligrams roughly every 4 hours as needed for their pain. Otherwise, the patient is taking no new medications. I will complete the required details for this home medication and complete the compliance. Once the list is a full comprehensive list of the medications the patient is taking at home, I can click to document the history. I am now logged in as emergency room provider, and I'm within the tracking shell tool. I can locate the patient as I have assessed them and decided that they need to be admitted for further pain control. Within the tracking shell, I will click to consult. From here, I can add in my order for an ED consult to general internal medicine and sign this request. By signing this order for an ED consult to general internal medicine, this fires a task to the unit clerk in the emergency department to contact the internal medicine doctor, who then will come to the department and have a conversation with the ED physician and further assess the patient. I am now logged in as the general internal medicine provider and have come down to the emergency room to assess the patient. Through the assessment, I've decided to admit to the inpatient unit and follow up on some ordering. Upon login, I will select to access patient list and the corresponding list for the emergency room department. From the emergency room department, I will locate the patient who I have assessed and want to place further orders on. I will assign my relationship to the patient, and once in their chart, I will perform a few tasks. First, from the orders profile, I will perform a admission medication reconciliation. For the inpatient stay, I would like the patient to continue their atenolol, continue the Lipitor. I'm going to order some new pain management control, so I will stop the ibuprofen, stop the lorazepam, and stop the ginseng. Once I have completed the reconciliation process for admission, I will sign. Next, I will place an order to admit the patient to the inpatient setting. I will also select the correct medical service to admit the patient under and sign the order. At this point, as the admitting provider, I would also place any other admission plans or orders that I require at this time. After placing these orders and refreshing the encounter, we can see from placing the admit to inpatient, the encounter type has changed from emergency to inpatient encounter. I am now logged in as a bed booking clerk and am ready to assign a location for the patient to move from the emergency room department. From my PowerChart application, in the toolbar, I will select the tracking shell and ensure I'm looking at the correct location emergency room. From this tracking shell, I will locate my patient, and I can note that there is a red dot indicating that there has been an inpatient bed request. Once ready, I will now select the gold key to modify this conversation. I will now place the patient identifiers in the person search tool. In the above selection, I want to ensure I have the right patient selected, and below, selecting the right encounter if they have more than one encounter. As the bed booking clerk, I now want to clarify and validate the information within this conversation, filling in any yellow required fields. Once I have completed and satisfied the fields, I will hit complete in the conversation. This will bring a document selection box up where I can print the appropriate labels and face sheets for the patient. For this example, I'm going to select to not print these documents. I am currently logged in to Scheduling Appointment Book as a clerk from an ambulatory setting. I am going to access PowerChart from this application in order to run a Discern reporting portal report for the unit. This process can be localized to how frequently each unit finds this necessary or helpful for running a smooth clinic. In order to access the report from the toolbar, I will click Discern Reporting Portal. From my reporting portal, I would access the appropriate report that I'm wanting to run. From here, I will select to run the report and specify my requirements within these further details. Once I've specified the details, I will hit to execute this report to be run. The following report is showing me patients who are currently booked to my setting, for example, have a recurring encounter on the LGH chemo department, as well have an active inpatient encounter, so that patients who are inpatient and may miss their outpatient appointment can be captured before the actual day of treatment. The patient is now transferred up to the ward. I am logged in as a general nurse and will access my care compass. In order to add the patient to my care list, I will click Add Patient and search. I want to ensure I have the correct patient selected as well as the correct encounter. Once I select OK, this will add them to my care compass. I will also need to establish my relationship with my patients in order to see the corresponding activities. Once I've established my relationship, I can see the activities that I have for this patient. I can see here that I have new results or new orders for the patient that's just been admitted. These all correspond to the admission documentation as an inpatient nurse that I need to complete. I will hit Mark as Reviewed. In order to start completing activities, I will select my activities section from Care Compass and I can start the process. For instance, to document on the basic admission information adult, if I select the document and choose to document below, it'll populate me into the corresponding documentation that needs to be completed. Also, review the allergies with the patient and ensure they are correct. I will mark these as reviewed. I will next see that there is a required documentation under weight. Upon weighing the patient, I will enter this information into the dosing weight section. I can also look at medication history and complete my BPMH from here. At this time, there is nothing new for the patient, so I will select Done and sign this form. I would continue on this process for all the required admission documentation as well as continue any ongoing care for my patient. While admitted to the inpatient unit, the internal medicine provider consults the hematologist oncologist. This is simply via phone conversation. However, in some areas, and health organizations, we are aware that the admitting provider could be the hematologist oncologist, which would then happen directly through the emergency department. In this scenario, the hematologist oncologist has been consulted by a phone call from the internal medicine provider and has come to assess the patient since they are due for their chemotherapy. Logged in as the oncologist hematologist, I would access my patient list. In organizations where oncology patients are generally kept on one ward, the provider can create a patient list specific to this unit. From this list, the provider can find the patient in question that they are there to assess further. When opening the patient's chart and after assessing them, they are wanting to move ahead with chemotherapy on the inpatient unit. The provider would first access the orders profile. From this profile, the provider would select the chemotherapy phase and view excluded components. The provider would place an OK to proceed with treatment order, where they are required to fill in some details. The provider would also need to make some modifications to the plan as it is intended for outpatient use at this time. The provider would select to modify the pre-medications to use patient's supply no. If this part was forgotten, pharmacy could adjust the use patient's own supply on their end. The provider would next ensure that the dosages were the same and they were not wanting to change anything with the ordering itself. In the next phase, if the plan includes a prescription phase, the provider would access the prescriptions phase, right-click on the prescription, and select to convert to inpatient order. The provider would next cancel this prescription, as if the patient were required to continue this prescription upon discharge, that would be captured in the medication reconciliation discharge process. Next, the provider would select the scheduling phase and cancel the associated infusion chemotherapy visit, as the patient would not be going to the outpatient space anymore. They would right-click on the order and cancel discontinue. At this time, the provider would also want to probably order some management for the post-treatment anti-nausea control. The provider would select add and order the specific oncology nausea power plan. The provider would select what post-chemotherapy antiemetics they require for this patient and the treatment they are providing. In this instance, the provider is going to place dexamethasone 4 milligrams PO BID for 3 days. Once the orders are satisfied, the provider is going to select orders for signature and confirm the medications in the profile are as they intended. For the prescription converted phase, the provider is going to state the duration of this prescription. For order cleanup, it is best for the provider to remove the details for the patient was taking this medication at home. However, if this step is missed, it can also be completed on the pharmacy side when dispensing the medication. When the provider is fully satisfied with the modifications they are making to the power plan, they can click Sign. Once refreshed, these changes are visible within the power plan itself. These orders will also show up as new for the nurse to review on the inpatient side. It is still a part of verbal communication to note to the outpatient facility that the patient has been canceled, as the scheduling order will now fall off of their list as canceled. It is also important to note that the treating nurse will be communicating with pharmacy that the patient is to go ahead with treatment on the inpatient space, and depending on localized process, set up the correct time to move forward with this treatment. I'm logged back in as the scheduling clerk in the outpatient setting. I want to show you how the canceled appointment populates. Within scheduling appointment book, as a scheduling clerk, I can access my view and select canceled appointments. As you can see, I can now easily view that the patient has been canceled. An alternative to this is that the scheduling clerk can actually access a list An alternative to that is that the scheduling clerk can do an appointment inquiry for the unit by location for the day. By hitting Find, I can see all the patients scheduled for the day and the state of their scheduled appointment. Once again, here we can see that the patient has been canceled. This does not negate the need to call the unit to let them know about the cancellation, especially if the cancellation is last minute.
This is the Pharmacy Oncology Review List. You can access this from the Pharmacist position, and you can get to this page by clicking on the button at the top here. So on this page, you have the start date and end date on the top left-hand corner of the M page, and that'll retrieve us the power plan for the patients that are due in those date ranges. You can also select your site and nursing unit. And you also have a drop down here. We'll be focusing on the inpatient one, but there's options for ambulatory, appointments, and some other tabs that we won't be going over today. There's a lot of patients on our list, so we're going to go down and filter for our particular patient by using the name filter and type in Greek, and that'll retrieve us the patient that we'll be using today. And on this page, if you look on the left-hand side, there's a column called checklist and 3 icons. We'll go over what those icons do. The folder icon opens the patient's chart. The plus icon opens the power form that we'll be documenting on shortly. And then the wrench icon opens a pop-up within the M page, and that lets you document clinical and lab checks that they are not applicable very quickly, and it'll update the columns appropriately. Before we document on the power form, I'm going to copy the plan name and then open the form. And this is the power form. We'll paste the name that we just copied into the protocol name field. And we also want to make sure that we have the cycle number and day number input properly, as this is how it ties back to the M page. You also have fields for Pharmacist 1 and 2. Pharmacist 1 is going to be you, and Pharmacist 2 will be the person that's doing the double check. You can do this now, or you can do this later on. The next checkbox is for clinical check and lab check completed. You'll mark yes or NA, depending on which one is the most appropriate. Next is a pharmacy clinical check, and you'll check off the checks you're performing. And lastly, you have a comments box. Once we save, you'll notice that back on the M page, the clinical check and lab check columns have updated. But let's say you accidentally document an NA for the lab check. We can go back to the power form by clicking on the clipboard, And that brings us back to the form we just documented, and we can update the lab check to yes. And back on the M page, you'll notice that the lab check column is now set to yes. Now let's verify our orders for this patient. And to do that, we'll click on the PPM, and this is the PPM. There's a lot of patients on our list for LGH, so we'll do the same thing that we did on the M page. We'll filter for a patient by typing Greek, which retrieves us the patient. So if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, there's View and Process. View will open PharmNet for us. Process will also open PharmNet for us, but it'll queue up all the orders that are due to be verified with the verify action. We'll click View since we'll only verify a couple of minutes. And this is PharmNet. We'll pick a pre-med and a treatment med to verify. We won't verify everything. Once you've selected verify, we'll apply the action. So on the bottom right hand side, there's the apply button. We'll click on that. We have to assign a facility. Our facility today is LGH. And here's where we'll be going through and verifying as the pharmacist. So you'll be going through and doing clinical checks, right patient, right drug, right dose, right route, frequency, any other clinical comments. And once you're done, you'll press OK. And we'll go through and finish off the rest of the medications. So for the doxorubicin, there's an option for the injection product or the IV set. We'll use the injection and press OK. But for the sites that give the doxorubicin as an infusion, you would select the IV set. This is a syringe, so we'll put 0 hours for the infuse overtime. And for the rituximab, there's a specific product built for sub-Q. You also have the infusion products available in the IV sets, but we'll select the sub-Q for this. Once you're done with the verification, you'll notice that the double arrows have now appeared, and now these orders are ready to be submitted. There's a submit button on the bottom right hand corner, and once we click on that, the mortar and pestle icons will now disappear, indicating that these orders are now verified. There's one last place to document the clinical check power form, and that's within PharmNet. You can click on the bottom left hand side, the RX interventions, and that'll bring up a pop-up where you can document on the pharmacy chemo clinical check. Same thing as we did on the M page, as long as you have your protocol name, cycle number, and day number input correctly, it'll tie back to the M page.